there any more zeros to this? So that was the biggest change coming out of investment banking into consumer banking.
Welcome to a special edition of Banking After Hours, leadership conversations celebrating women in finance, brought to you by AWS. In the middle of 2024, Malaysia has surpassed its 30% target of leadership position for its top 100 listed public companies, 6 years ahead of schedule. Inspired by this progress, my good friend and partner in crime, Taruni, who heads FSI sales in AWS Malaysia and Philippines, brought us a very good idea of doing a series of highlighting leadership and personal stories of the incredible women in Malaysia's finance space. In today's episode, I am joined by Gan Pai Li, who has an impressive career spanning over almost three decades, with senior roles across major banks like CIMB Investment Bank, RHB Bank, and is now serving as the Group Chief Consumer Banking Officer of Alliance Bank. Welcome to the show, Pai Li. Happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me on it.
So to start our conversation, I want to go back to the beginning and maybe travel a little bit back to time in 1996, when you were first an account relationship manager in the commercial banking division. How have you changed as a person, and how have you evolved since you first started your career to where you are now as the Group Chief Consumer Banking Officer?
Okay. I think as a person, probably haven't really changed much. Principles are the same. The go-get is still there. But I think in terms of experiences, that's been quite varied. Coming out of, commercial banking to investment banking, I was very fortunate to also join at the time when the bond markets first opened. And I think that was something that really grounded me, seeing how an industry came about together. And then now I see it again, right? A couple of years later, after many rounds in the IB, I decided to make that move into consumer banking. And you really see consumer banking evolving mainly into the digital space, such that you really can't segregate anymore between traditional banking and digital banking. It's becoming more and more one.
Was it very different though, going from commercial to investment to consumer banking? What were some of the differences in your journey in different divisions?
I think in the first week, the numbers itself, I asked and said, are there any more zeros to this? So that was the biggest change coming out of investment banking into consumer banking. Certainly, it is a much, much bigger volume sort of game, smaller ticket in terms of size. The products are varied. So it took me a while to figure out how mortgages are calculated, how the deposits work, how the ratios work, lots of ratio work in the consumer banking space. So certainly for me, it was that last bit that I just needed to finish up, the whole myriad of banking and what it takes, from IB all the way down to consumer banking.
I mean, the scale is certainly very, very different. But
Yes.
I suppose, do you feel a difference though? Because when you're in investment banking, while the numbers are a little bit bigger, you're not as close to the real economy, you're not as close to the real people. And then on the consumer side, do you feel that there is more impact? Do you feel that there's more direct difference that you're making in the lives of people?
Oh, for sure. I think in IB, we were living in a very cloistered world. You just do your IPO mandates and origination, you chase your deals. The teams are very much smaller. Here in consumer banking, it's actually all about the people. So the teams are larger. The type of experiences that the team needs to have is also quite different. And I think in consumer banking, yes, that connectivity to people, the man on the street, from your products, your service, the sort of fair treatment that we need to give customers, that's all very real in consumer. Something you would never see.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Not on the
Outside
investment
of
banking
this.
side of things anyways,
Yes.
right? So, you across this, I guess, almost 26 to 28 years of your career, you've accumulated a lot of experience, you've learned a lot of things. If you had the opportunity to kind of go back and tell the younger Pai Li some advice to maybe not have so much, mistakes or falls, or what would you give yourself as an advice?
I would probably still say to myself to stay the course. If you decided that this is something you want, then plan for it, but stay the course. So for me, I think tenacity. Probably I think consistency is something that we each need to figure out how to handle that in our own journeys.
Is that something you see in the younger bankers today?
Some. I still do meet quite a few personalities that I think have it to go all the way. But with them these days, I think the options are a lot more. So maybe that's why they're a little bit more distracted as to what they want. But in a way, it's great. You've got many opportunities to try different things and then figure out what you want. And at consumer banking, I think that's the role I played in trying to give them as many types of those opportunities.
I think it's certainly true, right? I mean, back in the day, if you're doing an innovation role, you're doing a technology role, where do you get a stable career about banking? But these days we have like guys like AWS say, hey, we want some of this talent too, right?
That's right.
So there's a bit of a difference in terms of that. I think one of the things that comes with leadership is difficult decisions. And sometimes, we don't you're put in a position where you have to make certain decisions that maybe were not popular. So maybe you can walk us through some of the most difficult moments that you've had in your career, how you've overcome them, what lessons were learned, what were the outcomes of some of these key moments in your career.
Sure. I think I use the term fail fast. Most opportunities like that are actually far and few for banks. Yeah. By the time you get your papers through, you get your investment through, it's almost a need to ensure it's a go. So that opportunity to fail is actually very small. And the hard decisions can be anything related to the type of people you have staffed in the team, the decision you made to pick a particular system or vendor. It could even be the commercials or the market has changed. I mean, look at us when COVID came. All our plans were stalled, right? So I think those are the decisions to redeploy people, to tell some of them that, this is not going to go through or you're not cut out for it. Those were the hard decisions to make.
And I want to jump to Taruni in a moment as well, but just one more follow-up question, right? And I think fail fast may be something that maybe banks are more open to now.
Yeah.
I think maybe if you spoke to your board like 5-10 years ago, it's like, don't fail at all, right?
Yeah.
It's a very kind of different thing. And were you at any point in disagreement with like the board or the senior management on a decision that you have conviction, you were very sure that were correct, and you managed to push your idea through and were vindicated in the end in your career?
Yes, I think we come across quite a few opportunities. I mean, not really opportunities, but we come across a few experiences like that. Yeah, but sometimes it's more a gap of just trying to bring what you see in the market into a boardroom is not so easy. Yeah, and I can explain that a little bit later on when we talk about the product that we launched.
Any specific examples?
Oh, yes, of course. It was the virtual credit card.
Okay.
I mean, to explain that in a boardroom to people who have used nothing but physical cards, that took a bit of explaining to get it through, but we did, and I'm glad that we got the support for it.
I mean, I can imagine some of the board members like, what would I use a virtual one for? I'm just tapping.
Yes.
We can talk a bit about the results later and why you were vindicated in that decision as well. And I think, Taruni, thinking back about Amazon's principles, right? I think there were 16 of them, if I'm not wrong.
Thank you, Vincent. You've been doing your learning.
We tried. We have to. And I think one of it was, and I like this one in particular, was to have backbone, disagree, and to commit. Right? Were there any examples in your own career or in the leadership in Amazon that you see where this principle kind of shown through?
So you've picked up the principle that's been the longest learning curve for me as a person when I joined the company. So, the fundamentals of this principle are you don't walk in looking for a compromise. So if you're in a meeting with your team, you stand steadfast on the conviction you have of what you're asking your team to do or what your vision is. Very often, the background that I came from was, let's make it a happy meeting, let's find a middle ground. But what this leadership principle really drives home is the point that if you've got belief in something, and as long as you can stand it up with the right data, you should be able to rally the team. Also, if you aren't able to, you still commit to whatever the team has decided. So as a team, you have a single purpose. You don't have, people who are acting at cross purposes with each other. I also liked what Pai Li said about failing fast. And I think a large part of what I do in my work today is to allow customers to fail fast without the overhead of that failure. So, for example, if she wanted to launch virtual cards and it didn't work, thankfully it did, but it didn't work, rolling that back when you use a platform like cloud is fairly easy because you're just putting in that investment for a short amount of time. I think in my own personal examples of, where I've had these disagreeing moments, it's been, let's take this podcast, for example, it's the first time we're doing something like this. So you present this idea, you've got the belief, you've got the passion, you've got leadership like Pai Li coming in, talking about it, and you get the team rallying through. Like I said, my biggest learning has been on this particular one because I always came from a mindset of, let's find a middle ground.
Yeah. But I think that's also intrinsically, I guess, a nature that we have as Asians, right? Like somehow we've been brought up to enter the corporate world to always just like kind of acquiesce and agree with the bosses, but sometimes it's not always the correct decision. But I guess it's also a fine line as well. Like when are we standing our ground for what we know is right, and when are we actually just being difficult, right? Just being hard-headed for no reason as well. How do you guys walk that line? How do you know when you're being right, and how do you know when to compromise certain decisions and ideas that you have?
I think it starts with your conviction. So if you go in with the intent of getting approval for a new product, you need to have at least some sense of determination that this will work before you pitch the idea. Then the rest, okay, maybe 10% compromise. They may not agree on everything, but I'm prepared to give this up. So in the end, it's about the trade-off. Can you live with the trade-off? If you can, at least you see that idea through. And from there, you get to build. But for me, what's important is that the experience and the opportunity to try something new, that's something I will fight for. Because I just don't think that we can stay as where we are. Yeah. And I think it's not fair to the teams as well. You need to give them the exposure. And especially we do need to go out and try.
For sure.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. So I guess for you, it's knowing what is best, and then kind of having non-negotiables around certain areas that you know is important to the bank as a whole, and having a few flexibilities where you think, okay, I can.
That's right.
Give a little bit away here in purpose of pushing this project.
Actually, Pai Li, what you've said is a beautiful summarization of another principle we follow, which is leaders are right a lot.
Right.
So you have the belief, you have the conviction, you really have the passion that this is the right vision and direction for my product, for my team, for my company. And that's your role as a leader to see it through.
For sure. And I guess right a lot is the key, but 28 years is also a long time, right? And I know I keep bringing out 28 years, I don't mean to.
Don't you ask me how old I am.
hammer in on that, so I will avoid that particular part of the conversation. But it's impossible to be right the entire 28 years. I'm sure there are instances that you were wrong. Are you able to share some of those moments, reflect on those moments, and what were, I guess, some lessons you've learned from that and how you come out of that as well?
Let's say that you will fail.
Yeah.
Can't avoid it.
As long as it's fast.
That's right. So fail, don't stay too long in the pits. The fastest way to get out of it is to get up and get a move on it. So I may take off and say, okay, this didn't work. I'm disappointed. I take off maybe half a day. But the next day I come back to work and let's go.
Regroup, pivot, decide what to do next.
And that's the sort of, I think, the sort of behavior we need to cultivate, and we need to demonstrate it, because there's just too many things that we just don't know enough about.
Yeah.
Or we need to try.
Yeah. But it goes back to your point of tenacity that you say, right? That's the tenacity.
I had a mentor once tell me, because a lot of our work in sales is you ride the highs, you ride the lows, and it is not linked to your caliber or the hard work you put in. It could be something, it's just luck, a CFO may resign in your old deal falls through. Yeah. And what my mentor said is, for tenacity, 24 hours, that's your test. If you win a deal, you're happy and you've got that high for 24 hours, and then you shut it down. And then you go back to your baseline. Similarly, if something doesn't work through, you can't sit around moping for more than a day. You just come back the next day and it's a new day, and a fresh start, and you bring back the energy that you put a pause on for those 24 hours.
Yeah, the saying goes, but tomorrow's another day.
Right.
Yes.
Celebrate, but not too much. Still need to move forward as well. I think that's a good principle to live by. But I mean, speaking of mentors, I pivoting to a different question here a little bit, right? Who were some mentors that were, I guess, most important to your career? Who were some mentors that you think really shaped your leadership the most?
I was fortunate to work with many strong-headed people. And I think coming from the IB background, you've got to be that sort, right? So yes, I had a few bosses there, when I think back, I think I admired what they had. They had this certain composure and very, very determined individuals to see things through. And they would try and try and try again until they got it right. So you see that more maybe in the IB side, because the teams are smaller, you're more agile. Coming out into the consumer side, maybe harder to see that sort of behavior. That's something that I want to put into the consumer group. Yeah. And that's something I push for very hard. So even the leaders who come and say they want to do certain things, I will push and push until I'm certain that they've got that conviction of making that success. And then I will support it through. So I think that's the sort of learning experience that you need to do as you interact with people, and you get to know your team better, they get to know you better. In the end, I think the working environment, the working engagement is something that I can say that I can trust this person, and this person can trust that I will support them through. Yeah, that's what we want to achieve.
From the outside in, we can definitely see some of that coming true, right? I think before you came on board and before your CEO, Kelly, came on board as well, we don't hear much from Alliance Bank, let's be frank, right? But of late, we're seeing more and more rollouts, we're seeing more and more innovation. And I think that's kind of something that's translating as well. What about you, Therani? Like some of your mentors, like who kind of shaped a lot of your own principles, shaped a lot of your career today?
It's been through the journey, and I think the best way I can describe it is that collective brain of people I've either worked with, worked for. Very recently, I found some of the younger folks in my company sit down, because especially when you're in the tech world, technology changes so fast that someone who's closer to it or has just come out of a university is probably has more knowledge on the subject. So I would just call it the collective brain. Someone taught me to be a really good manager, someone taught me to speak well, someone told me how to handle press, for example, someone told me how do I qualify a deal, how do I close a deal, someone taught me the financials of putting it together. So I've been very fortunate with managers, with colleagues, with people who worked with me. And I'm a little ravenous when it comes to wanting to learn. So yeah, I pick up and chew brains whenever I can to pick up best snippets and then put it all together.
Combination.
And it's a journey. I'm sure that it's
Correct.
a journey for you, right? You just don't stop learning.
I think we're fortunate that we've worked with leaders who are willing to teach and share. That makes the difference.
Yeah, for sure. And I like the point that Therani brought up as well, right? Learning from the younger ones. I feel like sometimes the more we progress in our career, the more certain we become of ourselves. And sometimes we become in a rut and we don't really learn new things. And then when we see the youngest one, the tenacity, the energy, the desire, and certain creativity, and we can't help to feel like, wow, there's a few things I can pick up from here as well, right? So
Especially like the user group, when we do the tests, right?
Yeah.
Shouldn't be people like us testing out digital products anymore.
Correct.
So we do try and get the right age group, the Gen X and or whoever would like to come and try. And we try it out in different segments to see just how user-friendly.
for sure.
Yeah.
And we need to do that.
But there's also another flip side of the argument where, well, yes, the Gen Zs, the Gen Ys are the
They want
target
everything.
group for digital products, right? But there are also people who are using, I guess, the baby boomers
Yes.
and the older generation, because if you are able to design a product that's simple enough for them, then it, by extension, will also
Yeah.
be simple enough for
Absolutely.
Gen Y. And sometimes it's not as straightforward as making the fonts bigger, right?
Correct.
It's how do you make it so intuitive that they also understand as well. I want to talk a little bit about your current career in Alliance Bank, and you've been in Alliance Bank about 5 years now,
Yes.
since your days from IHB to Alliance. What would you say is the biggest impact you've had on this bank?
I like to think that it's the impact on people. I felt when I got in, the teams were somewhat segregated, very siloed. Today, you have heads that carry more than one duty. So, for example, the head of deposits is also the head of finance.
Oh,
Nice.
Yes,
keeps things exciting.
it does. Then also the head who handles distribution is also head of segments. So I'm trying to sort of give everyone the opportunity to overlap. And you see a different perspective to what you're doing. So that's how consumer banking is set up here. It is not the traditional setup. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, not that I've really heard of that much.
That's right. So, for example, the latest thing we did was we took contact center and we put it with the digital sales head.
Oh, okay.
So what you do on the digital channel, eventually they'll call you a contact center.
Right.
So then you start thinking of the whole flow on the customer service. But we're doing that in compartments right now. I would ideally like to be on a system where I could really say there was no wrong door. Now that's, I think, something that I'm trying to push for in consumer banking.
And I think that's quite interesting, right? Because
What Pai Li doesn't know is thanks to this overlap that she's created, she's made it easier for folks like us, because when we go and talk digital, we're also talking to the contact center team because we see the channels blending.
That's right.
So instead of us having to navigate through the bank, she's enabled a path where speed really matters, and we're able to speak to the right people at the right time.
certainly you can also see the impact as well, right? And I think also from a consumer viewpoint, it didn't occur to me, but it's now occurring to me. It makes a lot of sense because like when I cannot solve a problem digitally, I don't want to go on a chatbot. 90% of the time it's standard.
That's also because you're not a millennial.
It's fair, right? If I was a millionaire, it might be a very, very different conversation. But I guess that helps the digital team to also be able to rethink like the proposition and how to actually solve some of these problems that the consumers may face. Going back to your the conversation about the virtual credit card earlier, which you said like there was some vindication over there. What's the outcome of that project?
We've done pretty well. The card base when I came in was 90,000. We're selling around 200,000 now.
Maybe taking a step back for the audience who may not be so familiar about this project, right? Tell us about this project, why it was set up, what you hope to do, and what did you achieve out of it, you know?
So the credit card business in Alliance Bank was a business that I think they thought about whether to continue or whether to sell it away.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
So when I first joined, my first thing was that if you want to be a player in the digital space, you need to bring in payments.
Yeah.
You can't do without the credit card.
Yeah.
But it was also true that commercially, the credit card business wasn't doing well financially.
Yeah.
So we needed to think of something that was a cheaper option and would bring the numbers back up. So that's why we came up with the virtual credit card. We also saw the opportunity because there was so much going on the people getting scammed, right? And we felt that the only way was to put the card in the control of the holder. And the other thing is that being a small bank, every time a card gets scammed, you have to stop all payments.
It's so tedious. It's a nightmare.
And because you're not the principal card, tendency is just drop this card. It's too difficult.
It's true.
Yeah.
I'm guilty of that a few times too.
That's right. So we needed to find a way that people wouldn't do that. And it would be so easy to replace your card. And hence why you have to exist on the mobile phone. So the virtual credit card to me was an idea which was many, many steps ahead. And like I said, to bring that to life in any boardroom or any party that you're pitching to wasn't so easy.
Yeah.
So when we did get the support, we went out and launched it. I didn't get everything I asked for, like I said, but the trade-off was enough to at least get it going.
Yeah.
So that's what we've done. Now, lately, I think we also extended the virtual credit card into the SME business space. And we just launched the SME business card with similar ideas to be used by a different segment altogether. So that's how the ideas need to grow. You need to have something out there to work on, right? And you keep on growing it and try to see how you can share it out with the rest of the bank.
Would you say to some degree that this whole idea of a virtual credit card kind of revitalized the credit card business for life.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I can certainly see the value as a consumer.
She's also picked up a part of the industry which is by far payments touches every single customer across demographics. So in terms of going after that right product, the right segment, you couldn't have done a better job there. And we're also seeing things like Project Nexus, Open Finance, which will only help to push this forward even more.
I mean, it's one of the most high frequency touch points that you have with your consumers. So that's where you really drive that kind of like.
So like mortgages, you don't talk to your customer after 35 years.
Yeah.
There's no opportunity to do that.
Unless something goes wrong.
That's right. Whereas with payments, you can.
Yeah.
So I think you'll also see that that's why the digital banks will also come in very heavy payments. You need that constant engagement.
Yeah.
The only way.
That's certainly true. And aside from like actual scams, some businesses are also doing legal scams, right? Where you subscribe and then it's impossible to unsubscribe. So this is a good value proposition as well. I guess in closing for this conversation, again, looking at your experience and looking at how the world has changed, how technology has changed, as a leader, what would you tell younger bankers today to keep up, to get to your to actually be able to progress to your level in the career somewhere down the line?
I think you must want to learn. You need to become one of those people whom they term the purple people.
Purple Blue?
Purple people are people who they have knowledge in how tech works. They may not necessarily be able to program, but they know how it works, how it should work, and how it needs to apply in the business. They're also the people who are strong in the business application bit of it. So when you combine the two, what you have is an individual who knows how it needs to work for the business. So that's the sort, I think, of mindset you need to change. You need to be interested in a myriad of things. A little bit more of a polymath thinking. Yeah.
I think certainly we're seeing more and more value into being a very skilled generalist these days, right?
That's right.
Yeah, the world is changing. I mean, you have to have your specialization, but you also have to have a certain degree of that broad skill set you were talking about.
So here we try and shift people around. I do get a lot of this squealing and whining about it, but but this is good for you.
Yeah.
And we do need more of this sort of people, this sort of genre that want to stay in banking, right, and do both sides, the traditional bit plus the not traditional bit, which is very much more skewed to digital.
For sure. And Tarun, anything you would?
I'd echo the same thing. In fact, I think if you're someone who isn't comfortable with not knowing things and then voluntarily reaches out to try and learn, it is a survival skill. And if you just look back in the couple of years that we've had, Gen AI was not a topic anyone knew about. And every 3 months there's something new that comes about. So you've got to keep refreshing. And so that tenacity to learn, that discomfort with saying, hey, I'm going to be honest and say, I don't know it all. And these are certain areas where I will reach out and ask for help. You've just got to build it into your DNA. That's the only way to be relevant and to keep growing.
I like that. I think if you're not slightly uncomfortable all the time, then something is not right. But not too uncomfortable, just slightly. I think with that, it's been a good chat, and I really love some of the lessons and some of the inspirations that you both have shared today. Thank you very much.